119th Congress of the United States is voting to elect the Speaker of the House, the first order of business in any Congress. It's not official yet, but it does appear as if they have voted not to elect Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, as Speaker of the House on the first ballot here. Johnson is huddling with Republican holdouts, trying to change their votes. It's unclear whether anyone will change their vote or if the House will move to a second round of voting. ABC's Jay O'Brien joins us from Capitol Hill on his watch here. So here we are with one ballot down, it looks like, and the next one, well, somebody's gaveling the House into order.
Yeah, Terry.
Let's listen in.
Oh, okay. Are we listening in? Because I can tell you what's happening just very quickly before we gavel in.
Do, please.
So there's a guy in white hair and a bald gentleman right there at the front of your screen. Forgive me for leaning in. I'm looking at my monitor. They appear to have just changed their votes. Those are the two Johnson holdout votes. I know you probably want to listen in now.
House will be in order.
Mr. Norman Johnson.
Okay, now go to Mr. Self. Donalds.
Mr. Self is recorded as Donalds. Mr. Self, Johnson.
Okay, that's it. Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, elected to be Speaker of the House after one ballot, after we had a couple of switched votes there, as you heard. After huddling with some of the members who opposed him, Mike Johnson has won their support and is the Speaker of the House of Representatives once again. It was close. It was interesting for a while, but at the end of the day, it was one ballot. Let's bring in Matt Gorman, who is a veteran Republican advisor to presidential campaigns and to Congress, Republicans in Congress. Matt, there it is. We'll find out what he had to give up for it, but that's good news for the Republican Party, majority in the House, and President-elect Donald Trump.
Very much so. It's never easy, is it? And look, I think it was actually a smart move by the Johnson team to not go to a second ballot, to keep them essentially sequestered, for lack of a better word there, until they could figure out how to get Self and Norman on the team. They waste a lot less time. The headlines are a little different. And at the end of the day, he's going to be the speaker. And one thing to note, I think, too, I believe we saw about 9 people either not vote initially or not vote by name initially for Mike Johnson. And obviously Thomas Massie's still outstanding. That will be the number, as it's written right now in the House rules, for the motion to vacate. So it might have been a little bit of a power move by those 9 people, showing that they are, at least initially, not with Johnson, and that they have that over his head, so to speak, going forward.
Got it. Just a signal rather than genuine opposition. And there was a moment during this long period before the vote was actually gavelled to a close, when there's a bit of arm twisting or horse trading, or pick your metaphor, when Mike Johnson left the House chamber with Congressman Norman and Congressman Self, the two of the holdouts. And as you see that total there, it's 218. That's what he needed to hit, 215, and won Thomas Massie's vote for Mike Emmer of Minnesota. And that did the trick. That moment where they left the chamber seemed to have resulted in this agreement. Once again, let's listen to the House.
The tellers agree in their tallies that the total number of votes cast is 434, of which the Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana has received 218.
This is an ABC News special report.
Good afternoon, I'm Mary Bruce. We're coming back on the air with a remarkable turn of events on Capitol Hill. After seeming to lose in the first round of voting for House Speaker, Mike Johnson has now just been declared the winner and will retain the Speaker's gavel. Take a listen.
The tellers agree in their tallies that the total number of votes cast is 434, of which the Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana has received 218.
It comes after Johnson at first lost 3 votes from within his own party. He could only afford to lose 1. But after voting ended and before the final tally, 2 conservatives with a change of heart, switching their vote to back Johnson, allowing him to now continue on as Speaker. Johnson, with a personal appeal, spotted there huddling with the key holdouts. Johnson had been adamant all along there would be no backroom deals to gain the support of far-right members, instead leaning on the importance of this moment and the need for Republicans to make the most of unified government. So let's get right to ABC's Jay O'Brien there on Capitol Hill. And Jay, certainly perhaps a bit messier process than the Speaker had been hoping for, a bit more complicated, but he had been confident all along that he was going to maintain the gavel.
Exactly right, Mary. A dramatic scene just there on the House floor. So Republicans choosing to leave this vote open, not gaveling it out, not ending the vote. Instead, we saw on camera Mike Johnson and other Republicans meeting with 2 of those 3 holdout votes, the 2 that Johnson would have needed to flip to get reelected. At one point, walking off the floor with both of them. That includes Keith Self and Ralph Norman. Those 2 holdout votes then meeting with Johnson behind closed doors. All of this playing out over roughly a 90-minute period since the vote ended. Ultimately, they emerge from behind those 2 closed doors, and then Ralph Norman and Keith Self, they walk up to the Speaker's rostrum and they change their vote just before the vote is gavelled out, which is allowed under the House rules. It puts Johnson over the threshold that he needed. And then, of course, applause breaks out in the House chamber. There's backslapping, there's hugs, there's handshaking. Mike Johnson even shaking the hand of, at least as we saw on the cameras there, Keith Self, after they appeared to talk behind closed doors. Now, Mary, as you said, Mike Johnson was adamant. He would make no concessions. He would not put himself in the place that Kevin McCarthy was in 2 years ago, where he made serious concessions that ultimately cost him his speakership. So very much unclear at this hour exactly what those 3 talked about behind closed doors, but clearly enough to switch those votes, Mary.
Just a remarkable about-face and unfolding of events here that allows Mike Johnson to maintain the gavel, but also for those ultra-conservative members to make clear their displeasure as well. Let's go to ABC's chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, because, John, looming large over all of this, the president-elect.
Look, Mike Johnson owes his speakership, his second speakership, to Donald Trump. It's just that simple. You had at least 17, 18 members who were poised to vote against him, who were uncommitted to voting for him. They faced pressure from Donald Trump, direct involvement from Donald Trump, who sent a very clear message. The message is, we need a Speaker of the House. We need a Speaker of the House now, because until we have a Speaker of the House, my election victory cannot be certified. That's scheduled for Monday, and we can't get to work on the agenda for my first 100 days. That was Trump's message. He made calls himself. He got the recalcitrant members to come to heel. But Mary, what this shows is just how narrow this margin is in the House, how difficult this process was. And he had a major argument to make, which is, you got to get a speaker so I can become president. I mean, what could be a more powerful argument for Donald Trump to members of his own party? He's going to have to use arguments going forward to get his agenda through the Congress. It may not be as relatively easy, even though this didn't look all that easy, to get as it was to get Mike Johnson reelected Speaker.
Those deep divisions certainly still remain within the party. Let's go to Rachel Bade, ABC contributing correspondent and Politico Capitol Bureau chief and senior Washington columnist. And Rachel, as John was mentioning, urgency certainly was paramount here, and part of the message and the pressure campaign being put on these ultra-conservative members on the far right, because they do have an ambitious agenda. So what comes next here?
You're absolutely right, Mary. I mean, when I talked last night to a bunch of folks close with Donald Trump, their message to me was that the incoming president isn't backing him just because he likes Mike Johnson or regardless of what he feels about Mike Johnson. This is about moving forward the president-elect's agenda. They wanted to move quickly. They want to get a border bill passed within the first 30 days after Donald Trump gets sworn in. A big, long, drawn-out speakership battle. It would delay the certification of the Electoral College. It could delay Donald Trump being sworn in. That is not something Republicans want right now. They feel like they've been given a mandate by voters to enact a lot of changes, whether it's on the border, whether it's on crime, whether it's on taxes, and they're eager to move quickly. And so you're going to see them do that right away now that Speaker Johnson has the gavel again. I mean, as soon as tomorrow, Mary, they're going to be gathering to talk about these sort of next steps, things they can sort of prep for in the 2 or so weeks before Donald Trump gets sworn in. So they're going to be moving quickly to get his legislation passed.
Lots of work to come. Rachel Bade, John Karl, Jay O'Brien, our thanks to you. Once again, Speaker Mike Johnson, in a nail-biter of a vote, has gained enough support, the 218 votes he will need to continue on in his role as Speaker. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live and abcnews.com. I'll be back with the entire team for World News Tonight. I'm Mary Bruce in New York. Have a good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Okay, thanks, Mary. I'm Terry Moran in Washington. You're watching ABC News Live. Our continuing coverage of the breaking news up on Capitol Hill that Mary just reported to you. Representative Mike Johnson of Louisiana has been elected Speaker of the House of Representatives for the 119th Congress of the United States, the first one back in 1789. The first round of voting for the speakership of this Congress was delayed while Johnson huddled with a small group of Republican holdouts. He needed a couple of votes, and in the end, with President-elect Donald Trump's support, Johnson came out on top. He will be Speaker of the House once again. It's unclear what, if any, deals were made between Johnson and the conservative holdouts to secure these final votes. ABC's Jay O'Brien joins me from Capitol Hill. All's well that ends well, Jay, at least from the Republican point of view here, right?
Yeah, and Terry, we watched that scene play out in dramatic fashion. So 90 minutes go by roughly from when the last vote was cast to the ultimate conclusion. Republicans made the decision to leave the vote open because they believe they could turn some of these no votes into yeses at the 11th hour, have them change their vote, and then technically Mike Johnson would win on the quote-unquote first ballot, which is exactly what happened. Mike Johnson seen walking off the floor. You and I talked about it live on the air with 2 of those 3 holdout votes, the 2 that he could flip, Keith Self and Ralph Norman. They go into the cloakroom, they go off the floor. We do not know what they discuss behind closed doors. Obviously, we're working on figuring that out at this hour. And then after some time, Norman and Self emerge. We see at least Keith Self shake hands with Mike Johnson. Those 2 holdout votes, they walk up to the Speaker's rostrum and they publicly change their vote, which plays out in, again, dramatic fashion. And I owe you a little bit of an apology, Terry, because it was so frankly dramatic and frankly exciting to watch that I was like shouting over you on the air as we saw them walk up to the rostrum, because it was such a rare thought. Originally, as this vote was ending, it looked like Mike Johnson was on track to lose and we were potentially going to go for a second ballot here. And then it obviously all changes on a dime. And now Mike Johnson securing the votes he needed, reelected as Speaker of the House. The question is, what did they talk about behind closed doors? Because Mike Johnson has been adamant he's not going to make any concessions. He's not going to make those McCarthy-style giveaways that Kevin McCarthy had to make 2 years ago to those holdout votes that ultimately ended up costing McCarthy his speakership after just 9 months on the job. So if Johnson's adamant that he's not going to do that, what does he say to those holdouts?
Yeah, and that's your job to go find that out, Jay. You're right. It was exciting for us political junkies, an afternoon of drama in the organization of the House of Representatives for this afternoon. So let's go to another political junkie, Rachel Bade, the bureau chief, Washington bureau chief for Politico, and our ABC special political correspondent. So, Rachel, what do you make of it all?
I mean, look, Terry, Speaker Johnson, he proved the naysayers wrong again. He's done it before. And now he's done it again. I mean, just a few months ago, you remember there was an effort to oust him led by Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massery to try to take the gavel away from him. He won then, and there were a lot of people who were saying, you know, over the past few days that he wasn't going to be able to do this and reclaim the gavel. And yet, here we are. He has done it on the first round. He has done it without making major concessions, at least that we know of at this point. And so, you know, look, it's going to be a good day for him. Obviously, he owes his gavel to Donald Trump. John Carl just said it during our special a few minutes ago. I totally 100% agree. I feel like the moment this was actually over was the moment Donald Trump tweeted on Tuesday morning that he still supports Speaker Johnson. And this came about a week, little more than a week, after Johnson infuriated not just Trump, but Trump's inner circle, a lot of Republicans here on Capitol Hill with that funding deal that passed through Congress just before Christmas, and yet he was able to convince Donald Trump to back him. This all goes back to the agenda, Terry. As you know, Donald Trump wants to get started on passing legislation. They can't do that if they're in a protracted speakership battle. So he wanted members to unify. He made that very clear, and that's what happened, Terry. It's all because of Donald Trump.
Yeah, and Rachel, you know, Mike Johnson's an interesting American politician at this point. He kind of came out of nowhere for most Americans to become Speaker of the House after that debacle with the ceremonial dumping of Kevin McCarthy by the rebels within the Republican Party, and they tried a couple of other names, and Mike Johnson emerged. And it turns out that quietly, unexpectedly in some ways, given the turmoil in the party and in the country, he seems like a speaker almost in an old-fashioned way, a guy who can get things done.
Yeah, the reason Republicans turned to him at the time was because he was known as a member who just didn't have enemies. I mean, Kevin McCarthy had angered a lot of people, made a lot of promises he couldn't keep. The people who tried to run to succeed him also had enemies. Steve Scalise, who was then, majority leader, Whip Tom Emmer, Jim Jordan, a top ally of Donald Trump. All of them angered a core group of members and couldn't get the votes. Mike Johnson was a fresh face and someone that people liked. A lot of people liked, whether they're conservatives or moderates. Now, look, he's been in the job for a year. The sheen, the sort of sparkle of him has sort of worn off here in the Republican conference. I can tell you that confidently. I do know that a lot of people did not like the way he handled the government funding bill I was just talking about a couple of weeks ago. And there have been criticisms of how he leads. Some people feel like he doesn't have a plan, or if he does have a plan, he doesn't bring his team into the loop. He doesn't share it with members until, the last second. They feel like they want more leadership. But look, clearly Republicans are willing to give him another try. And so they're getting behind him, and we'll see how he does. It's a slim margin, Terry. It's going to be a really, really tough job when he can only lose one member and try to get things passed.
All right. That's a great insight there into how Mike Johnson has handled the speakership. He came to it in that kind of emergency situation, and how he's doing with your reporting among rank-and-file Republicans. Let me go to Matt Gorman, a rank-and-file Republican, I think it's fair to say, given his years as a senior advisor to presidential candidates and to the Congress as well, Republican majority in the Congress. So what do you make of what's gone on and of what this means for Mike Johnson's leadership and the Republican agenda under President-elect Trump?
A couple things. I think you're right. President Trump does get the credit here. He got involved, made it very clear where he stood. I think that helped avoid any sort of stampede to no votes. And look, I will say this, and your folks alluded to it before, people underestimated Mike Johnson a lot, right? He was, in some ways, people thought he's an accidental speaker. You're right. People didn't know really who he was. He fought back against the motion to vacate last fall and was able to navigate Ukraine funding, for instance, and other things. He has done a pretty good job of showing his skill when he needed it. I have to give him credit. I think him and Trump really were able to bring this over the finish line.
Well, Matt, stand by. I have some breaking news from X, Elon Musk's social media platform formerly known as Twitter. Chip Roy, Congressman Chip Roy of Texas, who was one of the fiercest holdouts and, in fact, did not end up voting for Mike Johnson. He was the one holdout the Republicans couldn't get, has issued a warning. He said, everything we do needs to set Congress up for success and to deliver the Trump agenda for the American people. Speaker Johnson has not made that clear yet. So there are many members beyond the three who voted for someone else who have reservations. And one of those three, Virginia Representative Scott Perry, who ultimately did vote for Johnson, said he still has reservations. While I maintain my reservations about Speaker Johnson's leadership, I voted in support of President Trump's agenda. I guess, Matt, does that sound like Johnson is on thin ice, even though he wins his vote?
It sounds like a dignified exit or a dignified concession from some of these folks, more than anything. A little bit of face saving, look, as to why they were initially before they were against him and now they're for him. Whatever they need to do to save face is fine. The one person, they don't mind angering Mike Johnson or making him wait a little longer. The person they don't mind angering, they do mind angering, is Donald Trump. And so they want to make sure they're on the right side of him. And I think that's where these statements come into play.
Let's take a look at Mike Johnson taking a victory lap on the floor of the House, re-elected to be Speaker of the House of Representatives. All right, there is the Speaker of the House, once again, Mike Johnson, Republican congressman from Louisiana, elected to the House of Representatives back in 2015. No, strike that, 2020, and has been Speaker of the House in the last Congress, a dark horse candidate for Speaker of the House in the last Congress when the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, was deposed unceremoniously by Republicans. Here he is in a victorious moment. And by tradition, you see there on the right, in the upper right-hand corner, Hakeem Jeffries, leader of the Democrats, congressman from New York, will hand the gavel to Mike Johnson, call him to the rostrum. It's a show of bipartisanship that is traditional, where the Speaker will accept the gavel from the leader of the opposition. It's a very narrow majority, as you can see there. Let's listen to Hakeem Jeffries.
Emerita Pelosi, it's great to see you back in the chamber. Whip Clark, Chairman Aguilar, thank you for your kind and generous words of nomination. to my colleagues in government, new members of Congress, families, friends, all those assembled. It's a high honor and a distinct privilege to welcome you to the People's House and the 119th Congress. The Bible teaches us in Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, 1st verse, that for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. It's fair to say that in a democracy, there's a time to campaign and a time to govern. The election is over. This is a new Congress. The American people need us as their elected representatives in this season to put down our partisan swords and pick up bipartisan plowshares. It's time for us to come together, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans, to get things done for the people. In that spirit, House Democrats will work hard to find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues in the incoming administration on any issue, whenever and wherever possible, in order to make life better for everyday Americans. For far too long in this country, the cost of living has gone up, but the size of the middle class has come down. Housing costs are too high. Grocery costs are too high. Child care costs are too high. Insurance costs are too high. Utility costs are too high. America is too expensive. There are far too many people in this great country who for decades have been struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. That is not acceptable in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We need to build an affordable economy for hard-working American taxpayers, and we need to build it now. It's time for us to come together and finally lower the high cost of living in the United States of America once and for all. And we will work with anyone of any party to get that done. We will work with anyone to secure our borders, and we will work with anyone to fix our broken immigration system in a comprehensive and bipartisan manner. At the same period of time, we will push back against far-right extremism whenever necessary. So let me be clear. Social Security and Medicare are not entitlement programs. They are earned benefits. Hard-working American taxpayers pay in to Social Security and Medicare every day, every week, every month, every year throughout their entire adult life. They've earned those benefits, worked hard for those benefits, and deserve those benefits. So as Democrats, our promise to the American people is that we will fight hard to make sure that no one in this town takes away Social Security or Medicare from the American people. Not now, not ever. No means never. Our position is that it is not acceptable to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, cut Medicaid, cut veterans' benefits, or cut nutritional assistance from children and families in order to pay for massive tax breaks for billionaires and wealthy corporations. House Democrats will fight hard to protect working class Americans and the things that matter to them, not the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. Keep your hands off Social Security and Medicare. Over the last 4 years, it's been a great honor for us to work alongside President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, whose administration rescued the economy from a once-in-a-century pandemic, delivered historic infrastructure investments, created more than 15 million good-paying jobs, enacted common-sense gun safety legislation for the first time in 30 years, provided life-sustaining health insurance to veterans suffering from toxic exposure, championed the largest investment in combating the climate crisis in the history of the world, which we will defend, and brought down the high price of life-saving prescription drugs for millions of Americans. Thank you, President Biden and Vice President Harris, for your powerful, principled, and purposeful public service. Thank you. Two months ago, the American people elected Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States of America. Thank you for that very generous applause. It's okay. There are no election deniers on our side of the aisle. See, one should love America. One should love America when you win and when you lose. That's the patriotic thing to do, and that's the America that House Democrats will fight hard to preserve, because we love this country. America is bigger than any one campaign, any one election, or any one individual. America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Let us never forget that our country is free, not simply because we are strong. America is strong because we are free. That freedom is now under assault. There are some in this country who apparently believe that the freedom of economic opportunity that made them wealthy should not apply to everyone else. Our message to that crowd is simple. Democrats will never abandon the long walk toward freedom. We will fight hard to defend the freedom of opportunity that makes the American dream possible. We will fight hard for the freedom to vote, and to fight for a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We will fight for the freedom to organize and join a union of your choice. We will fight to defend the free enterprise system, but work hard to make sure that it actually works for working class Americans. And we will always defend a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. America promises one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's the America House Democrats will fight hard to preserve. God bless you. God bless the House of Representatives. May God continue to bless the United States of America. It is now my responsibility to present the gavel to the gentleman from the great state of Louisiana, the son of a firefighter, a God-fearing man, a husband, and a loving father of 4. The 56th Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, the Honorable Mike Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Leader Jeffries, all of our treasured colleagues here in the House. I'm grateful for this nomination. I'm grateful for this election, for the confidence this chamber has placed in me. It is the great honor of my life to serve this body with all of you. Of course, these are difficult days in our home state of Louisiana, where I come from. We all know about the terrorist attack in New Orleans, and it's really shaken our state. People are reeling from that attack. It took the lives of 14 innocent people, and it injured dozens more. And I wanted to begin appropriately today. If we could, I'd ask you all to join me in a moment of silence for the victims of this horrific act. Thank you. Thank you for that. I believe in giving honor where honor is due, and all of us do well to honor our spouses. My wife happens to be here this time. She didn't make it last time. It happened a little sudden. Kelly, would you stand up here in the gallery? Thank you. And we have our 4 children here, Hannah, Abby, Jack, and Will. We all stand up just really quickly. Come on. I wanted to do that. All of us recognize that there are no perks to being a congressman's kid, right? It's all sacrifice. And our spouses put up with so much, endless hours in travel and all the responsibilities upon us. And we're good to remind them how important they are to us and how we could not do the job without them. And so it's appropriate for all of us to do that. Thank you. Thank you, guys. This is a momentous time in the nation of the history of our nation. It really is. And as members of the 119th Congress, we are stewards of the great American Revolution that began almost exactly now 250 years ago, 1775 and 1776. It will fall at the time of this Congress, the great anniversary. And in these 2.5 centuries, we've been reminded repeatedly that freedom is never free. And we have stood tall as the greatest nation on the face of the earth. It is without debate. We are the freest, the most powerful, most benevolent nation that has ever been in the history of the world. And it's not by happenstance. We're the ones who settled the West. We're the ones who ended slavery, who laid the Transcontinental Railroad, who gave women the right to vote, who won 2 world wars, who landed on the moon, and who won the Cold War. Throughout our history, we have done what no one thought was possible. And still, at 250 years old, our nation is actually a young nation. This past fall, I had opportunity to go to the G7 speakers meeting. It was held in Italy. It's the only international trip I took as speaker over the last 14 months because I didn't have time to do it, but it was a quick 3-day jaunt, and met with my colleagues, the speakers of the other parliaments, the great governments around the world. And we talked about that, how really special America is, how unique we are in our place on the globe, and how important it is for us to maintain that. And as I talked to these colleagues from around the world, I thought our closest allies, who recognize how important we are, how important this body, this house is. I thought about how is it that such a young country has become so exceptional, so singular in its importance, that today stands as the world's leader in liberty and
the economy and culture. 100 years ago, President Calvin Coolidge answered that very question in his inaugural address. It was March of 100 years ago, exactly almost. He said this: "We best serve our own country and most successfully discharge our obligations to humanity by continuing to be openly and candidly, intensely and scrupulously American." I love that. I love that. Today, yeah, that's right. That's an applause line. Today, my friends, our nation is the envy of the world. Why? Because we have been marked by a spirit and a people who are explicitly that. We are explicitly American. We don't try to be like other nations, and we recognize that a strong America is good for the entire world. And everybody around the globe knows that. That's right. We also recognize that the core principles that made America what we are must still be preserved today. The principles, I call them the 7 core principles of American conservatism, but it's really the 7 core principles of the nation itself. Individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, and human dignity. These are the ingredients, the things that made us who we are. And in America, we know that human flourishing is best achieved by adherence to time-tested truths. We could list a number of those simple truths. Here's a couple. It's better to give a hand up than a hand out. That innovation thrives when bureaucracy dies. The simple truth that it is parents and families and not administrators that must be in charge of their children's education. The path of prosperity has long been paved with policies that put America and Americans first. And that is what we will champion in the 119th Congress. We have a mandate, and that was shown in the election cycle. The people want an America First agenda. They do. Sadly, for the past 4 years of divided government, too many politicians in Washington have done the opposite. Open borders and overregulation have destroyed our cities and stifled innovation. Inflation and weak leadership have left Americans poorer, and they have placed our country in a perilous position. That's right. But in recent months, we've witnessed something happening, something that's really remarkable, a political moment in our modern history, a groundswell of Americans from every state, race, and religion who now demand that we put the interest of Americans first again, and we will, and we will. This is a powerful new coalition of our country. It's a coalition that insists that we purge the policies of America last and we bury them in the graveyard of history's mistakes, because it was a big mistake. To that end, this Congress will renounce the status quo and we will listen to the voices of the people. We will act quickly and we will start by defending our nation's borders. That's the #1 priority. Yes. In coordination with President Trump, this Congress will give our border and immigration enforcement agents the resources that they need to do their job. We will secure the border, we will deport dangerous, criminal, illegal aliens, and finally finish building the border wall. You said you'd work with us on that, Hakeem. I'm counting on it. After 4 years of high inflation, we have a big agenda. We have a lot to do, and we can do it in a bipartisan fashion. We can fight high inflation, and we must. We'll give relief to Americans, and we'll extend the Trump tax cuts. We're going to protect our industries from one-sided trade deals, and we're going to bring overseas investments back to America's shores. That's right. We'll defeat the harmful effects of inflation, and we'll make life affordable again for America's hardworking people. As leaders of a nation with vast natural resources that God has blessed us with, it is our duty to restore America's energy dominance, and that's what we'll do. We have to apply common sense. We have to stop the attacks on liquefied natural gas, pass legislation to eliminate the Green New Deal, that funding. We're going to expedite new drilling permits. We're going to save the jobs of our auto manufacturers, and we're going to do that by ending the ridiculous EV mandates. And as heirs to the American Revolution and the descendants of patriots who defied tyranny, in the coming months, we are going to pass legislation to roll back the totalitarian fourth branch of government known as the administrative state. We're going to drastically cut back the size and scope of government. We're going to return the power back to the people. And in coordination with President Trump and his administration, we are going to create a leaner, faster, and more efficient federal workforce. We need to do that. Our people do not deserve to be ruled by millions of bureaucrats they've never voted for, never met, and can never hold accountable. They deserve a government that is led by those they've elected to lead. That is how Article 1 is supposed to work. That was the idea of the Congress, and we will return to that principle. The American people have called on us to reject business as usual and throw out the status quo. We must and we will heed their call. This is especially important as it comes to our nation's military. For too long, the Washington establishment has sought to appease and accommodate our nation's adversaries. They've tried to replace our military warriors with social justice warriors. It does not work. And while we're still the most powerful fighting force in the history of the world, by God's grace, the same establishment has eroded the capacities of our Army and Navy and diminished the readiness of our Air Force. We have to put an end to this madness. My friends and my colleagues, I think we should all unite in this idea. It is time now to reinstate fear in our enemies, refocus our mission on lethality, and realign our commitment to peace through strength right now. We have to prioritize the things that matter most. We have to make adequate investments in defense. This is the most dangerous moment since World War II, and everyone around the world is looking to America and looking to this body to ensure that we maintain the peace. What we're proposing now is just simply, as President Trump likes to say, a return to common sense. And he's exactly right. That message resonated across the country. I am very thankful, personally, that this body is filled with men and women who are committed to that change, to return to common sense. We can do this together. We should. It is our responsibility to do so. When I first took this gavel, many of you heard me say that I don't believe in luck or consequence. I believe in the idea of providence. And this morning, I participated with many of you early this morning in the 119th Congress Interfaith Prayer Service. It was held at St. Peter's Catholic Church. Many of you were there. It was an ecumenical service and a bipartisan service, which was great. My good friend Hakeem Jeffries began by reading with the Old Testament. He read out of Deuteronomy 10. and then I was asked to provide a prayer for the nation. I offered one that is quite familiar to historians and probably many of us. It said right here in the program, it says right under my name, "It is said each day of his 8 years of the presidency and every day thereafter until his death, President Thomas Jefferson recited this prayer." I wanted to share it with you here at the end of my remarks, not as a prayer per se right now, but as really as a reminder of what our third president and the primary author of the Declaration of Independence thought was so important that it should be a daily recitation. Let me just read you that prayer. It goes like this. Thomas Jefferson's Prayer for the Nation, it's entitled. "Almighty God, who has given us this good land for our heritage, we humbly beseech thee that we may always prove ourselves a people mindful of thy favor and glad to do thy will. Bless our land with honorable ministry, sound learning, and pure manners. Save us from violence, discord, and confusion, from pride and arrogance, and from every evil way. Defend our liberties and fashion into one united people the multitude brought hither out of many kindreds and tongues. Endow with thy spirit of wisdom those whom in thy name we entrust the authority of government, that there may be justice and peace at home, and that through obedience to thy law we may show forth thy praise among the nations of the earth. In time of prosperity, fill our hearts with thankfulness, and in the day of trouble, suffer not our trust in thee to fail, of which we ask through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen." That was Thomas Jefferson's prayer. Yeah. Suffer not our trust in thee to fail. We will not fail. We cannot fail. We are all in this together. Our nation is counting on us to band together and solve these problems and get this done. I've said before that I believe God has elevated each one of you, this is my belief, to your positions of leadership. And it's an act of providence that you've all been placed in your specific roles in this specific moment at this historic time, at the 250-year inflection point of the greatest nation in the history of the world. It is no small thing. We're also witnesses to the providence that spared our incoming president, President Trump, from the assassin's bullet, remarkable as that was, and to the new coalition of Americans that has risen from every creed, color, and cul-de-sac who want us to put America first. Our people are asking for a thriving economy and a rebuilt middle class and strong borders and a strong military, and we can deliver that. See, these objectives and these aims don't have an R or a D behind them. They have a USA. That's what we're about. In just a few moments, we're all going to take an oath. It is the same one oath for one nation and under the banner of one great American flag. This is an opportunity for us to protect our shared American heritage, to maintain the conditions needed for self-government, and to defend what Hakeem said earlier, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Working together, we have the potential to be one of the most consequential Congresses in the history of this great nation, so long as we work together, we do the right thing, and we put America first. As we think about all we've accomplished in the past 250 years, we can only imagine what life will be like 250 years from now. Whatever the future may look like, if we do our jobs now, we can help ensure that our civic virtues will endure, that this nation will still be an example to all the world for its greatness and its example of self-government, and that in spite of our great challenges and even our disagreements and our healthy debates, this extraordinary institution, the People's House, will still be standing strong. Thank you all so much, and God bless America. So as the sequence of events requires, I am now ready to take the oath of office. I ask the Dean of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Harold Rogers of Kentucky, to administer the oath. Hold just a second, Dean. We don't have the microphone on yet.
Celebrate our shared American self-rule. When our founding fathers rejected calls for an American king and chose a bold and innovative government of self-rule, it was met by opposition, understandably, by the world's kings. They said, "You can't govern yourself. You need a king to direct the country." They said, "It's only a dream, self-rule." The founding fathers said, "You're right. It's the American dream." And thus, our founders said that we should move on our own with our own leadership. The Speaker of the House is the critical protector and promoter of self-rule, the keeper of the dream, if you will. And we've elected this man from Louisiana to carry on our bold experiment in democracy and self-rule. So, sir, if you're ready to assume this awesome responsibility, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely, that you take this obligation without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which you're about to enter, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations, Mr. Speaker. Well done. Thank you.
You may as well remain standing, because according to precedent, the chair will swear in the members-elect en masse. The members-elect will all rise, and the chair will now administer the oath of office. Will you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which you're about to enter, so help you God? Congratulations, you are now members of the 119th Congress.
doing. There we have it. The House of Representatives, which you've been listening to, the newly reelected Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, the congressman from Louisiana, was reelected to become the Speaker of the House in the 119th Congress of the United States, the first one way back in 1789. Johnson elected after one round of voting. It was a small group of Republican holdouts, but in the end, Mike Johnson, with President-elect Trump's support, including a couple of phone calls apparently today, Johnson came out on top. Let's bring in ABC News contributing political correspondent Rachel Bade and our senior reporter Catherine Falders. Catherine, let me go to you first on Trump's role in this. We've been watching this afternoon. It looked as, after the initial voting, as if Mike Johnson was not going to be elected Speaker on the first ballot. And then they kept the vote open. There was some huddling with some of the holdouts, one of whom I guess has said that he had a lively, quote-unquote, lively conversation with Donald Trump. What can you tell us?
I'm sure it was lively to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. But here's what happened. Obviously, that vote was kept open for a while. Those two members, Ralph Norman and Keith Self, of course, weren't voting for Johnson. And then there was that huddling that you saw there on the House floor and then behind the scenes. And that's when I'm told by sources that President-elect Trump called both Norman and Self to essentially persuade them to vote for Johnson as Speaker. Of course, one of those members has confirmed that conversation occurred, but then that's what you saw. You saw them then go to the well of the House floor and vote for Johnson, which of course put him over the line there. Terry, Trump has been making calls throughout this process here. We know that he has had members down here at Mar-a-Lago talking to them about it. Of course, Speaker Johnson down here earlier this week, Chip Roy, one of those members who Trump has been meeting with and speaking with on the phone, and he has been getting involved in this process, calling some of those holdouts. We know he was doing that last night, along with Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, and of course, he did that today while that vote was open. So we were talking about earlier all of the behind the scenes that happens during the vote, and if this happens in real time, or if everybody knows who's going to vote for who going into this. And the answer is no, this all unfolded in real time. Trump was following it. He was getting involved. He was working the phones. Of course, he will take credit for it. He is a bit in an interview that he did with another publication where he said he was glad to have helped. And we've heard from him, of course, on Truth Social congratulating Mike Johnson. But the good news, at least for Johnson and for Trump, what they would say is that this only, of course, had to go to one ballot. There weren't multiple ballots. And Speaker Johnson is now the next Speaker of the House.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, indeed. So Donald Trump taking a little bit of a victory lap, and Rachel Bade Mike Johnson as well, and outlining what is without question a Trumpian agenda there, one that he supports. He talked about America first. He said in this election, people demonstrated that they wanted an America first policy, and the Republicans have a mandate to do that. He said innovation thrives and bureaucracy dies, went on after the administrative state, which he called a totalitarian form of governance, and deal with the borders, of course, build the wall. This is a victory not just for Mike Johnson, but for Donald Trump, as Catherine was just explaining. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Terry, it's those very proposals that he can sort of attribute to for why he is Speaker right now. I mean, Republicans are very eager to get started passing Trump's agenda. They feel like voters gave them a mandate. They don't want a protracted speakership fight, and that, more than anything, is why he is Speaker right now. You know, I talked to a bunch of folks close with the president, and look, they said, you know, Trump is still not happy with how Mike Johnson handled the government funding issue just a couple of weeks ago, right before Christmas. But look, he likes him. He intends to give him another chance. But more than anything, he just doesn't want the chaos. He doesn't want to go, you know, several days without a speaker and have his own, you know, the Electoral College delayed on January 6th, where they would certify him as the next president. He doesn't want his inauguration delayed. So look, that's the main reason why Mike Johnson is Speaker. I do think it is noteworthy, though, before he gave this speech, Mike Johnson was off the floor. He went on the floor, and before he did, reporters asked him, what did you give conservatives to get where you are today? And he gave them one-word answer: nothing. And that is a very significant victory for Mike Johnson in and of itself. If you think about Kevin McCarthy, and all the wheeling and dealing he had to do in order to get the gavel just a couple of years ago when almost 20 conservatives blocked him on the first vote. He ended up giving away a lot of his power as speaker to conservatives, and ultimately that was his downfall. Mike Johnson did not have to do that, but he still has a very incredibly thin margin that is going to make his job very difficult from here on out. And, you know, these conservatives who ended up backing him, Terry, they're already issuing a warning. There is some thought that there were 3 people who voted against him, 6 who held out. Originally, I'm saying 3 people who were going to vote against him, 6 people who were holding out their votes. Apparently, they were trying to send some sort of signal to Speaker Johnson. 9 members total. It will take 9 members to oust him as Speaker if they want to. So they wanted to sort of send that message. They also just issued a letter saying there are a number of things that they are still unsatisfied with Speaker Johnson, and they want him to make a number of changes in terms of how legislation is brought to the floor. So look, he's on thin ice with these folks, but the point is they got in line with him, and he's going to get a shot to lead.
All right, and Rachel, that is a letter from the dissidents is probably too strong a word, but that caucus who are keen on cutting a lot more federal spending than Donald Trump may want. But Trump himself issued this statement on his social media platform, Truth Social. Congratulations to Speaker Mike Johnson receiving an unprecedented vote of confidence in Congress. Mike will be a great speaker, Trump adds, and our country will be the beneficiary. The people of America have waited for 4 years for common sense, strength, and leadership. They'll get it now, he says, and America will be greater than ever before. And I want to ask about that agenda. Trump and Elon Musk, who's not quite co-president, but certainly the second most powerful person in the country, and the people coming into this administration have indicated they want to move fast and break things. They want big changes. They want them fast, and they're going to need the Congress to do some of that work. And I just wonder, you know, can Mike Johnson wrangle this Republican caucus with such a narrow majority to keep the momentum that Trump clearly wants? He thinks he can get more done the faster and bigger he goes.
Well, Terry, nothing unifies Republicans like issues like taxes and tax cuts and cracking down at the border. But as you know, the devil is in the details. And moderates and conservatives on these issues that very much unite Republicans, they are divided when it comes to what those policies look like. He's going to have a really difficult time getting anything passed through the House. That's just the reality of it. I mean, I covered 2017. I was covering House Republicans when Donald Trump first became president. You know, Speaker Paul Ryan back then, he had a much larger margin of error. He could lose, you know, several dozen Republicans at a time and still get something passed, and yet they were not able to pass the Obamacare repeal that they were trying to get through the House for several months, and it ultimately failed in the Senate when John McCain gave his famous thumbs down no vote against the repeal of Obamacare. Look, the margins are much more difficult, as you know, Terry, right now. And so Donald Trump, he's going to have to keep leaning in to get things done. I think one thing leadership has really learned over the past, 48 hours is that, Donald Trump can make things happen when he wants to. And so leaning in and trying to get these holdouts to yes, he was able to use pressure to do that. They're hoping he can do it again when it comes to passing bills, Terry.
Yeah, passing bills. The framers of the Constitution designed the Congress and the government to move slowly. It's not something Donald Trump, I think, wants to do, but you're right. Those are the facts. Rachel Bade and Catherine Faulders in Florida, thanks very much. All right, and now to some of the other major news today. The investigation is intensifying into the deadly terror attack in New Orleans. New barricades are now up along Bourbon Street after a driver plowed into a crowd of people on New Year's Day. 14 were killed, dozens others were hurt. Police are also ramping up security reinforcements there. Meanwhile, authorities are back on the scene of the suspect's home in Houston, Texas, executing a raid and searching for answers as to how and why the suspect, a U.S.-born Army veteran, became radicalized by ISIS. And earlier today, President Biden said he has spoken with some of the families of the victims of this attack as the White House announced that he, Joe Biden, and the First Lady are set to visit New Orleans on Monday. This comes as sources tell ABC News that Law enforcement agencies across the nation are on high alert over potential copycat